Hello everybody! My name is Erika, and today we will be continuing the Spineboy in a Snowglobe project. Last time we did complete the 2.5D effect on the tree presents and on the Snowglobe base, which we can see here. So in case you missed it, don't forget to look at the recordings of the previous session, which I think is ideal if you're starting with Spine and you're interested in getting that nice 2.5D effect going. As anticipated in the previous session, we left at doing first the simple items, like a simple cube here and the snowball globe where we raised the difficulty a little bit. Now for the next thing that we're gonna be doing, we're gonna try to apply what we learned the previous time to Spineboy, and given that Spineboy has a rather complicated pose to rig, I'm gonna show you how you could rig this sort of character in a difficult pose, which is ideal when you're animating characters that are more in moving illustrations rather than supposed to be jumping around, or in any case where the body is in perspective, and I'm gonna show you some techniques to do that today. We're gonna also implement some physics constraints inside this project. As always, we need to be in setup mode, select the create tool, and then select the parent bone. In my case, I already selected this parent bone, the hips. So from here, I'm gonna be creating the bone that is gonna follow the same structure as the one that I had here on the arm. Okay, let's reason. If I give it a length, I can have it oscillate, wobble sideways. If I instead give it just a null bone, so if I place it just at the end, then I'll be able to do some other things. So there is another thing that I have to consider when picking which one to use, and that is the fact that if I use the technique that I intend to use, where I pin one bone as it's basically the same as we have here. So one bone will act as the container of the leg, and the other one is in charge of dealing with the perspective. The limitation when we have a link that is long is that in theory we could only move this bone, for example, only in parent axis like this, okay, to get the shortening. Only having this sort of bone is not actually useful for me in this case, and instead I think that I'll go with a long bone. That's what I'm thinking. Setup mode, create tool, I select the hips. I start with the first, selecting the first art by hitting Control. So I'm holding Control, Command on Mac if you're a Mac user, and I'll release Control after I'm done with that, and then start from the middle of here and create the bone. Then I'll make it end around here, where there's supposed to be another imaginary circle around here. Okay, with this then, I can create a bone on the tip. And if you remember from last time, I explained that if you are in parent or local axis, and then select a bone, from version 4.0 onwards, I think, it is possible to choose new bone, and that creates a bone on the tip of my bone, so that it's perfectly there, ideal when you're creating IK constraints, because this will make the IK constraints not move. In this case, we don't need IK constraints, but it is still nice to have a bone on the tip. Now I'm gonna use the missing link technique once again. So basically, instead of also drawing this bone, which would be natural, I'll skip that, which is why a link is missing, and I'll directly create a new bone that targets the foot, that starts from here, and then I'll add one to control the foot orientation. Okay, this way I should be able to get the perspective a bit more wobbly in this area. Because this leg is very visible, I think I'll try to give you a quick demonstration and then also do this on the other leg so we see it completely on one of the items. So how would I go about this? I'll select the first image and turn it into a mesh. Edit mesh, and I can trace this. Let's see. Oh, looks like I did a tiny mistake. I'll accept this and then remove the extra vertices that were going around that mistake that I added. Then I can adjust the position of the vertices. I think these are a great starting point, but I always have to touch them up a little bit. I remove isolate, and then I'll create some more vertices Why do I need some more vertices? Because if you remember, we want to convey the shape, and the way we obtained a shape that looked a bit more believable here was to add some vertices on the inside of our cylinder here to simulate the curvature. So we're gonna apply the same logic to this piece here, and the minimum amount to simulate that something is curved is actually to add just a couple of vertices, so divide this in 3 sections. I'm gonna show you. So I have this here, edit the mesh, select the create button here, and then I'll add a vertex here, a vertex here. Why did I choose these places? Because this is where there's a separation from light to the middle color, and here is where more or less the darker part starts. Then I'm gonna create an orange line so I can force the geometry that I prefer. Does not matter where this ends, but I could check that it's ending in a good place like this. Okay, and then maybe I modify it, because actually the more symmetrical this is gonna be, the better results I'm gonna get, and it's also gonna be easier for me to weight this. What I care about is that I have at least this one line acting like this to separate this side from this side of the leg from this side of the leg. And then there's this part that it's not gonna do much. For now, I'm gonna try to work with this. Then I'll be binding this to both this bone and this bone that I previously created. Press bind again and test this a little bit in setup. I'll key the translation at first, so I have the extreme, which is gonna be this for sure. Then I'm gonna get this to be in perspective like this, even if the rest of the images are not gonna follow, which I could get to follow really. So I'm gonna select this, and where's the other one? Okay, I'll parent them one by pressing P. So 1, 2, all right, there we go. Then back here, I have these in place. Okay, in animate mode, we're gonna test that the perspective is working. So first of all, as I keep repeating, we have to identify our extremes. So we know that this part is the part that is the closest to us. So the part that is gonna be the further away from us is gonna be this ending part here. I actually already did this setup on the other girl on the swing. So the Celestial Circus one. First, I can apply 100%, and this gets the shortening done. But now, we're gonna sell the 3D effect, and that's accomplished by selecting these 2 vertices that I strategically placed earlier, and increase instead the influence of this leg up R bone to simulate perspective. Alright, and with this simple trick, it looks like it's curving and like it has a mass that pops out when the perspective is changing. See? It can be very simple with very few vertices. Let's propagate this logic also to this bottom part here. We don't actually need to have a perspective going on this round place, because if you remember, when we have something that is round, either we add a gazillion vertices, like in this case, or we pretend they did not exist, which is what I'm gonna be doing on this one. Same logic on this piece. Super simple. Check mesh, edit mesh. Let's try tracing. Okay, tracing gave me a very good result this time. I'm still gonna delete some of the useless vertices that it generated. Well, I don't need isolate for this part. I'm gonna create the extra vertices. So I'm gonna be starting here from where I see that it kind of attaches to the shoe, and then add another vertex here. Then you see it does not connect correctly. The triangles do not flow the way I want, because I wanted to separate this plane from the plane that looks up. So I'm gonna click and drag to connect these parts. Now they are separated. See, look at this. Shadow, light. Okay, that's what we're focusing on. Let's do something similar also here. Why am I aiming here? Because it's roughly at the same distance, and it's where there's the separation from shadow, light. Okay, then I'll isolate a little bit, and I'm gonna be placing this here, and I'm gonna create another orange line like this. Good enough. Let's go with this. Then I'm gonna be binding here and here. Notice there is no middle bone, which I know is something that is gonna be confusing if you're used to seeing all the bones in place. Okay, now let's test this too. I'll get this to be here in the beginning, and then it gets brought here. Ah, it looks like it got some automatic weights. Very sweet. So see, whenever I don't have this bone to use as an indicator, it becomes a tad harder to use the correct perspective for these, since I already know, because I did this on the other one, more or less what I want to get this perspective going, first of all, I'll assign 100% of the weights here, and then I'll simply select these two and raise the influence. Okay, here just a little bit. Maybe on these two, I can lower it a little bit by adding more shoe influence. Okay, so we'll get more of the perspective effect. See, the more I get this, the more they are gonna be anchored in place following the shoe. So let's say that something like this, it's fine, so they don't go too much outside of this fuzzy part that is very tactical, because it lets me get away with not having perfect shapes, because it hides the messy parts. And like this, we also got this nice perspective going. I could also get the shoe to be in perspective, to be honest. Perhaps I'll make this bone a touch shorter. Okay. And then I'll create another bone on the tip like this. You're gonna see, again, super simple setup. I'm gonna modify this just so it wraps around a little bit better. So maybe I'll create vertex here, so they're in similar places. Then I see that here I did this sort of thing. The closer it is, the easier it's gonna be to control the weights. Okay, I don't want these pixels to be cut, so I'll have to leave a little bit more distance or move these a bit more down. Okay, yeah, maybe down is better. Oh. Okay, then the most important part is actually to create, once again, something to convey the perspective, and that's gonna be accomplished, once again, dividing the side of the shoe, the front, and the other side. Could also add this maybe here. I'm gonna see without it first, and then maybe I'll add those vertices. Then I will bind these at first. If I want the shoe to be able to rotate, I will need to assign the weights only to this bone that controls the rotation specifically of the shoe, because otherwise it will be absolutely linked to this bone, which I don't necessarily want. And then to the bone that is in charge of controlling the shortening and the perspective of this. Let's go to animate mode, and we're gonna once again test the translation of this part. I'll get it to shorten like this, and then I'll apply the weights, which in this case did not automatically get the weights right, but it's okay. It's shortening, but it does not look believable at all. I think I'm gonna assign a little bit more of these. So this needs to be 100%, because if I do it this way, it looks like it's in reverse. Yeah, this could also get a little bit of perspective. So if I'm having this, let's have it on both. Maybe this one. Okay, so it's just slightly less, so we get more of the perspective going. I'm gonna select these parts and also all of these, and then choose new physics constraints. Now, of course, I get some warnings on the constraints. On the constraints, there are null bones, because those don't want rotation, they want to be translated instead. So I'm gonna select those. I can select them all at once and change their properties all at once. So turn these off and then turn the translation on. See, they are not crying anymore. It's already working a little bit in perspective. I want to move to the side, so we only have his body here. Okay, let's look at it without bones. So as you see, as I move it this way, definitely the foot is moving too much, but it is in perspective. It's like I'm moving a body around, so that's awesome. So we'll go back here. I actually don't want the translation to be as strong. I'll try to halve this. Okay, it's already better. Let's see. So that's my rotator. I could just turn these again, just half it. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's good. Let's also do the other leg at this point. And now it's moving in perspective. Let's see it without the bones. Okay, I think I'm gonna create the test animation for these that I'll call literally test. I could just get the globe to shake. Let's see, I'll translate first in one direction, then the other. Let's see it in the preview. So then I said I wanted to change the leg up. So I could get it either to rotate less, maybe like this. And now suddenly, whenever it's moved, it's slightly different. So what about more damping, less damping? Yeah, I think this one I want less damping. Okay, and instead on the other one, I think I want slightly more damping. Okay, so they are still similar, but a tad different. I guess that for now, I could have all of the parts that belong to Spineboy actually parented to Spineboy. So for these, I'll create also a bone for the head. First of all, I'll select here the head base, parent it to this bone, and then choose new bone to create the bone exactly in the middle of this image. So we have this. Let's create a mesh. We can focus on two things. One is the bending and one is the perspective effect. Okay, the parts that will let me bend the body laterally. So to get some good bending, we will need to slice the torso into at least 3 parts. If I only focus on the sides and then deal with the middle part later, then I could do this in 3 parts, so that this can bend laterally like this. And then I'll use this to control the perspective instead. I'll use this simplified version of the mesh. I will bind this to the hips, this, to control the bending. Then I'll go in animate mode and get these parts to rotate a little bit. So maybe first like this, in the other direction like this. I'll hide the arms, and I can do so quickly by right-clicking these parts. Okay, now they are hidden. Convenient. Let's see. Is this bending as I want it? So we see that the 3D effect is definitely not there while I'm doing this, but it's okay. Also, the weights are actually wrong. First, I'll get the weights to work. I'll assign 100% of the hips here. Then I need to have progressively less of the hips influence until we don't have any more influence at all here at the top. So it should be like this. If you want, you can also cheat by pressing the smooth button like this. Okay, now it is rotating sideways. We want the perspective to also happen. So I'll modify this mesh again and add sections to simulate this perspective. So here I have these parts like this. We said we want to have it as simple as possible, so I'll just have this front part and then the 2 sides. So it's gonna be basically like this, okay? These are my sides, and they have to respect the rotation of this part here. Then I'll have to create slices also here like this, so they all respect the perspective of the body. So it will look like this. Okay, I think this is it. Okay, see? One side, one side, one side, and they can also bend laterally, which it should be done automatically. Also notice how having a good structure should actually instantly improve the way it works. So this is without it, and this is with it. Now we have more influence of this. Lastly, we want to have the perspective going so that this body can also move in perspective. So how are we gonna do that? It should be enough to translate this down along the parent axis. I'm in parent axis. I'll shorten this like this. Right now, it is not moving in perspective, so we have to change the weights. I want to make sure that this is actually working. I could possibly do this where I go back in setup, add this bone to the binding, and then maybe it should be possible to just swap this bone for the other. So I select these 2, press swap. Let's see if it's doing the perspective. It's actually disappointing, so I cannot quite do that, but I can use the swapping for some of the parts. I think I'm gonna swap this middle part here with this bone, so I get the perspective only on this section here. This is something that is available only from 4.1, version 4.1 of Spine onwards. Okay, and definitely in this top part, I think more influence is due of the perspective effect. Actually, I am happy with the influence of the hips, so I can lock the hips influence and only replace body with body top to the amount that I want. Okay, I'll stop at a problematic point, which I think is this one. Now I have it a bit more in this fake 3D. Okay, Okay, I'm only gonna add the physics constraint for this. Instead of rotation, I'm gonna get translation first to the maximum to see the result. Then if it looks bad, oh, that's so weird. It's like he's dancing. We kind of need it to be a bit different than that. Maybe it's the fact that it's not rotating. Let's see, what happens if I also add a physics constraint for this? That actually improves things. I think I'm gonna have the influence, because I have two bones that are doing this thing. I think they are too strong, and that I prefer to have this, okay, less strong like this. Okay, let's try now. Oh, much better. Yeah, okay, so now it's doing this. And we can move Spineboy around. I could get this body top to not rotate as much, which would make it interesting. If I get the strength to be stronger. Let's see. It's too strong now. It's anticipating what I'm doing. Maybe less inertia. You know, I guess it's fine. Then we're gonna have fun also with the rest. Like getting the head to also bob around. Let's see. I could immediately do that. Select the head. New physics constraint. No rotation. Yes, translation. Let's see. Yeah. Maybe the whole body. Let's see. Okay, so even though he doesn't actually have a neck, he kind of looks like he does. I think he could have slightly less influence of this translation. Subtle effect. Let's also get this effect going on the parts that we hid before. So the arms. Let's reactivate the arms. 1 and 2. Okay, for these, we know the drill. We create the mesh, very simple mesh for these. So I'll create one here, then modify this. Okay, basically like this. Alright. Then I'll create that magical 3 sections like this, that on tubular objects helps me simulate the depth so well with so little effort. Okay. I'll also do the same on this arm here. Mesh, edit mesh. I'll just create the 2 sections, 1 and 2, okay, like this. This, I think it's a great example. Then I will bind this, first here, then here. Here, I'll go with the bone that is supposed to show my mesh in the front, and then the other, that's the logic. I'll test once again that this is working, so I'll translate these two so they go back to their respective position, and then in here I'll get them to be shorter and shorter like this. Perfect. Okay, maybe I'll remove the rotation for this one since it's not necessary anymore. Okay, so it's doing this. I'll apply the weights so they do this, and then get the perspective effect going by increasing the influence on this side here, so the side that is the most in the back. Whereas if I want this part to also feel it a little bit in perspective, I just lower a little bit the influence by giving it the influence of the other bone, and suddenly it should start to look more in perspective. Now this is a bit hard to see because this is a small section, so let's also get the effect going here. Okay, first of all, we need to make sure that this part here is attached to the arm, and that's achieved this way. Secondly, we're gonna be assigning more influence here to get also this perspective going here. I'll raise the influence of this here to have more perspective effect also there. And voila, we also have that effect now working here. I'll also do the same on the other side. I'll select here the other arm, turn it into a mesh, edit the mesh. Then I'll create those 2 sections like this once again. It's very convenient that this is an arm because arms do not bend or do weird stuff like the body here, only staying there. Then, okay, here we have one of those weird corner cases because it's actually staying in place. That's what it's doing. So for these, I could skip this entirely, pretend that it's working fine, and because it's round like this, so I'll undo this, yeah, we'll just see it displace a little bit, which could also just work. We're gonna see that. Okay, first I'll bind these here and here. Then I'll go in animate mode. So in theory, if this is working as I want it, I should be able, okay, when the arm is moved like this, to just translate this part, and it will look like I have the arm attached to it. But as you see, it should help me fake a little bit of the perspective, make sure that this part here is connected, and once again, I need to check that the shortening is believable by King, the translation. Okay, I'll get it to be shorter. I actually wanted this one, okay, to be translated closer. And then once again, set the weights so that this part 2 is following the perspective more, and this part is instead anchored more in place. Okay, as you see, super simple. Now we'll get also these parts to move a little bit with the rest. So new physics constraint, I'll select the ones that are null bones, turn off rotation, get the translation to 50%, so it's not too strong. He'll be able to shaky. Okay, for the present, I think we could try to do something interesting. Out of curiosity, I want to see what it would look like if I simply turn this into a mesh. Yeah, I'll just create new mesh like this. Yeah, I think this could work. As far as the structure of the mesh goes, I think this should be fine. Then what happens if I bind this, but I bind this to the gloves? Okay, so this need to use something that looks like a hand or something. Okay, so it looks similar to that hand, and this the other hand. I'm gonna be binding this here and here, animate, and if this moves, okay, right now it's doing this, very funny looking. I think I'm gonna get it to be, first of all, here 100% on this side. Then I think I could just have this be 100% on the other side. Okay, then it's doing this. We want only one hand to control the perspective and the other not. Another thing that we could attempt doing could be instead to assign 100% to this bone, and then here to the perspective, but it would be problematic because it would break. Yeah, it would do that. Maybe only one hand is actually controlling the perspective more, so I could have this only be 50% holding that while the other one isn't. What happens if I do this? Well, that's an effect. Now it's like both hands are kind of holding it, but also not. It's not too bad. I'm gonna leave it for like this for now. Okay, then I'm gonna bind these two to both hands. I could get this to be in the middle between the two. Okay, so it's not completely attached there. Okay, last half hour of stream, I think we could do the little ribbons that Spineboy has here in the back. For this, I think I'm gonna have a very simple structure where I'll first have, okay, one bone here to control these ribbons, and then another bone here, parented to the previous one, so I have a little bit of a delay. So I'm just gonna have null bones for these. So, simple structure, we said. I'm gonna parent this to the main body top, so it follows that. And I'm gonna, I don't know, select maybe this, so they are parented to it. And place this maybe in the middle. Okay, and then parented to that, I want this placed here. Then let's do the same also on the other side. We said this. In the middle, so they are similar. And then here in the middle, like this. Now let's create this structure, the mesh structure for this. So as you see, the important part here was to separate these parts that overlap, so it would be easier to create the perspective effect. Now what do we notice about this scarf? It is kind of round, which we hate round stuff because it makes it harder to rig them. So instead, we will be outlining the dark and light parts. First, I'll try by just changing these into meshes and then binding them to this bone and this bone so they just follow very lazily. Oh, I love that. So the weights would be something super basic, so that this part is attached to the body, this part is also attached to the body. Then I'll actually already create here, okay, I have to select this and this, the physics constraint, not rotation but translation. So when this is moved, they do this. Without doing anything, this sort of works. So see, it kind of has this effect because this part shortens, but this retains the shape. Ooh, I love this. Means that I can do less work in general. I think I'm just gonna create a mesh here to make sure that this part is anchored nicely. Mesh, edit mesh. So what are we gonna do? I'm gonna remove the isolation. I'm just gonna create here the two vertices so that those parts are anchored and not detached, and then bind them both both here and here. Then, okay, and I'm gonna move these so it moves from here to closer to the body, okay, to test the 3D effect. Then this one here needs to be stronger, okay, until it feels attached. And I got it into compliance. Do I want to make the scarf more 3D-ish than this? I actually don't. No, let's see. Edit mesh. I'm gonna add vertices, 2 vertices here to simulate the scarf being more 3D-ish. Okay, then raise the influence. Could also get this part to be more influenced by the back, so it feels more in perspective, like this. Well, if it's this simple, then I guess it's doable. Okay, let's also do it on this one. So we need to just add the vertices that would help us simulate, convey this shape, which is basically separating this part, the top part, from the down part. And you can see here that, okay, here's the line, top, down. So we go in animate mode now, and we change the weights. Okay, I'll get this to pop out more. Let's see first here by increasing the influence of body top, like that. And then also for this one, like this. Then maybe if I want to make it easier for me to add detail, because I don't think that just doing this is gonna cut it. I mean, it kind of works, but it could be better. So I'm gonna add slightly more detail here, so I can anchor this part better. And then if I add another vertex here and here, I should be able to control this part more easily. Okay, this is actually one of those useless vertices, and I actually liked the flow going from here to here. Compare the structure to before and after, you can see that already, because I have a better structure, it is behaving in a nicer way. Okay, I think I'm gonna need to move this, or to add an additional vertex here to control the perspective, or not. Maybe here to control the perspective, because here's the line, okay, of the perspective. Let's see. Yeah, I guess that's it. So here I'm gonna increase the strength. No, maybe not. Maybe just a little bit. Okay, maybe I want it increased also here, and therefore also here. And voila, now it is a very round sort of scarf. I need to make it feel slightly more connected, so perhaps I'll stop there and change the influence for this part also here. Okay, the only problematic part is, I think, the fact that here I can see part of the part that I did not paint. Because who has got time for that? Let's see. Yeah, I kind of finished painting around there. So I'm gonna add an extra vertex there to control that and hide it better. Okay, now it feels more attached. Then here, I think I'm gonna increase a little bit influence. Here, if I see like this part is peaking here, now having good art that gets you some leeway is gonna make your life so much easier. In my case, I went for suffering because I can see it peaking from here, through here. Another way is to simply move this vertex here. Okay, so it was actually the vertex that was including a part that I did not want. If I move it here so it matches the art better, I think I'm gonna get automatically better results overall. Oh yeah, and then I can just change the weights. Oh yes, suddenly it is a lot better. Even though it is curved, which curves never give that much satisfaction. Let's look at it without bones. So let's also get this going on the other part of the scarf. What I like the most is the fact that these are not at all complex shapes, so I hope they make it easier for you to understand the structure of these two. Edit the mesh, and I'll modify my mesh and then move these parts like this and more or less like this. Alright, then I need to get that effect of solidity here. So if I imagine this as being round, and I kind of did it through the art, because you can see here the line is breaking, that's a hint that I need to place a vertex here, because it's where the line changes direction. It tells me. Okay, let's see it also here. Where is it changing direction? Here and here. So these convey the shape. There's the top part, there's the down part. Okay, then following this logic, I think I can get this to reach the top like this. Super simple. Let's bind this now. Okay, so for this it's gonna be a tad more difficult, because I said that I wanted to have this and this to control it, but also be attached here. So I'll attach this here and here first, and then I'll attach it here. Actually, I'll attach them all. Okay, and then use this to control the effect. Ideally, I get this part to be influenced a tad further than that. So when this is translated, it gets translated further away like this. Okay, then we need to get these to follow. I'll get, first of all, these parts to be 100% on the violet bone, and then I'll get these in-between parts to have in-between weights. Okay, and okay, let's see. Yeah. Alright, then we said here, if I get this to influence it a little bit more, I'm gonna get better results. But if I want this to be connected, attached to this top part, then what I could actually do could be to replace this arm up R for this section with scarf ribbon. So I'll swap them. I need to select them both first. Okay, so now they will behave more like this, so they are stronger, because I want from here onwards to only be influenced by these two. I think this needs to have the strongest scarf influence, and these a little less strong, and these a little less strong. Then here a bit more, but to have a little bit here of arm up R, and also a little bit here. Okay, if I did this correctly, I should be able, okay, to have these follow the main motion, but the part to have a slight delay. Now, I'll test this, but that's only if I parented these so it slows down, and I'm also gonna add more damping here, so it takes a longer time to arrive. Okay, let's test this in my test animation. I'll move. Oh, that's the issue. That's why it wasn't working. It only had rotation. Then maybe the damping was not the problem. Well, anyway, yeah, I think I can definitely get the damping to be more normal. And the damping, less damping, more bouncy, more damping, more damping. Okay, 21. Let's see how 21 is scoring. Yeah, okay, much better. I could possibly also get it to have slightly less strength, so it stays more in place. Let's see now. Oh yeah, we'll attempt to stay longer in place because it has no strength. Let's do also the other side of the ribbon. If you want to use the other side as a reference, you can do so by activating wireframe. So now they are always visible at all times, these ones, so you can use them as a reference even when they are not selected. So I can turn all of these into meshes, then I'll select this, edit the mesh. I don't want them isolated, I just want here. Okay, so I can use those as a reference. I use it all the time also to match perfectly one mesh with another when they are overlapping, so you can get the placement of the vertex completely perfect. I'll isolate here, and even in isolate mode I still see the outlines of these. I'll also activate my wireframe. So if I had activated that here, it would have been easier to tell where one mesh was ending and how to match perfectly. So if, for example, I were to activate that here, I would notice that I did not add vertices here. So I'll actually add a vertex here, so I have it and one here then, so they can match nicely and smoothly. And here I could maybe add one here, so that then it's easier to get the vertices to also match here. It is doing this. Let's look at it without the bones. And the result for today's stream is more or less this. I actually could, just to complete a little bit this, add the physics also to the gifts. Okay, just to the controls, which, if you remember, were these icons here. Okay, I'll just add new physics constraint instead of rotation. Okay, to all three of them. We have to turn off rotation, turn on translation. Maybe not too strong, because then it distorts the GIF too much. When the globe is shaking, they should also rotate. Oh, actually, it needs to be a tad stronger than that then. Yeah, let's get it to 100%. Let's see now. Okay. and we get all of the different results. They are anchored in place, so I guess that I could also have these for the other parts. So this gift here actually needs a holder bone, so we can have the gift bounce around. So I'm gonna select the blue present, choose new bone, so I get a bone in the middle that can act as the container, and then I'll simply parent these and parent these to it, so now it's finally organized as it should be. Then we said we also want the containers to have the effect, so container green, red and blue, new physics constraint, and at this point, okay, the gifts are also bouncing in there. We're gonna do something more interesting with the gifts at some point. To do was to not make them all move at the same speed, same strength all the time, because it's kind of lame. I don't know, maybe one has more damping, one less, one a lot more. Okay, let's see now. Okay, now they move at slightly different speeds, which makes it a bit more interesting. Actually, I think that also Spineboy needs to have the hips need to have that physics constraint, so he's not anchored in place. So here, new physics constraint, get the translation going, maybe the less strength. Okay, just to change a little bit the settings. Let's try it now. Oh yeah, we're getting there. The last thing that I wanted to do was also apply this to the snowball perspective. Okay, whatever, let's see the result. And so this is the result. So I think I'm gonna set the inertia to be a tad less, and maybe the damping to be a tad stronger, to have it to be a bit bouncier, more staying in place. So in theory, with small movements, this is sort of working. I think I'm gonna tune it, but tune it in the next stream, because for now I'm also happy as is. If I just move Spineboy around, okay, that's exactly the effect that I was going for, and I'm really happy with that. And as always, there is a download link in the description of the video here. Thank you so much for staying on the stream with me until now. I will see you again on the next session. I hope you found the missing link technique interesting here on the arms where you and on the legs where you expect something to be there but it's not, and so it creates an easier perspective effect. I will see you again next time. Thank you and bye bye.